I'd pause for a moment, trying to lean casually against the stone tile column, watching the holiday crowd as carefully as I could without being obvious. Clueless, they streamed by me intent on their shopping, flavored coffees, and apparently endless streams of text messages. The familiar weight of my concealed sidearm pressed against my ribs, accompanying presence after weeks in Dubai, where I'd had to rely solely on my wits and hand-to-hand skills. Not that those skills had atrophied. If anything, the high-stakes cybersecurity job had honed my situational awareness to a razor's edge. I made it another 6 feet and managed to sit at one of the mall food court tables. I pulled a leftover soda cup in front of me, so it looked like I had a reason to sit here. Any reason other than finding a quiet place to process what I just learned. The cold fury coursing through my veins made it hard to keep still, but years of training allowed me to maintain an outwardly calm facade. Everything had gone wrong, but I'd left at least one of them dead for sure. Probably two. My wife, Veronica, and her partner, Jonathan Blackwell, the notorious arms dealer known as the Phantom. Just thinking their names made my jaw clench. Somebody must have forgotten I'd been a Navy SEAL for years before climbing the ladder in the cybersecurity world. I've been a very good one. I'd left more than my share of enemies dead in my career, and now it looked like I might have to add 2 more to that tally. If they really were trying to kill me, they'd been sloppy. They had to have been. Arms dealers and their associates don't usually start shooting without identifying themselves. Certainly not at a former Navy SEAL turned cybersecurity specialist. I fumbled out the cheap pay-by-the-minute smartphone I'd managed to buy at the kiosk. I didn't think the guy had really bought my story about a computer crash at my bank, but $200 in cash had gotten me an anonymous phone in 3 hours of time. He'd probably reported up his chain, and I didn't blame him. He could sense something was off, and I doubted an obviously recent immigrant from the Middle East wanted to get caught up in anything suspicious. Let him call. It didn't matter. The 3 hours of talk time I purchased were probably too much. I doubted this would take even half of it. I fumbled with my wallet, pulling out a scrap of a business card, then punched the number into the phone. "Hey, 2 executive services," a current clipped woman's voice said. I kept my voice as calm and level as possible. "I need help. My wife is trying to harm me," and a click sounded as the phone cut off. Damn. I slumped and closed my eyes. Damn it. I couldn't even think of where to go next. This was probably it. I was going to have to take them both out myself. Things be damned. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from an unknown number. All it had was an internet link. Nothing to lose. I went ahead and pressed it, and the phone promptly replied with downloading an app. A long few seconds later, an icon appeared on the phone. An icon of a stylized K2. I pressed it, and the phone dialed. K2 Executive Services. The voice sounded muffled and odd, like the speaker was underwater. "Please hold your phone at arm's length and look into the screen." I followed the instructions and watched the screen pull as the phone took my picture. It flashed the image on the screen for a moment. Not particularly flattering. My complexion was pretty gray. But then that was probably shock and barely suppressed rage. Almost instantly, the woman on the other end spoke again. "Name, please." "Dominic Thorne." There was a slight pause. I got the distinct and uncomfortable impression she was checking my credit score. "Your operational status." "Armed, uninjured, but in need of immediate assistance." "What is the nature of your situation?" "My wife is involved with an arms dealer named Jonathan Blackwell. They've been selling classified information I had access to. I need to neutralize the threat. Please hold." The thing actually began playing hold music. The girl from Iponma, of all things. I stared at the phone in disbelief for a moment. Then the voice came back. "Thank you for waiting. We have an asset available in your area. Move to the south entrance of the mall and wait near the men's restroom. The contractor will arrive within 30 minutes. I may not have 30 minutes. They could be closing in as we speak. The contractor will arrange for immediate extraction if the situation escalates. Do you require medical assistance? Negative. I'm combat ready. The line clicked with grim finality. I pushed myself off the table and began to walk as carefully as I could. Try to look casual. Look like another busy holiday shopper. The south entrance was over a quarter-mile away through the mall. As I turned out of the food court, I glanced back and saw no sign of pursuit. Good. I had a head start, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Clothing stores, shoe stores, and restaurants crawled by as I worked my way along the edge of the crowds. It took nearly 20 minutes, and I almost made it. I could see the sign for the restroom and was almost shaking with anticipation when I felt a hand grip my right elbow tightly. A couple, likely for kids in bulky, bright coats, passed me, using promises of hot chocolate to keep them in line. Keep moving, Mr. Thorne. There was an ever so slight accent. Eastern Europe, maybe. Maybe Russian. I looked over at him. Very nice black suit. Black wool overcoat. Even if I ignored the accent, he didn't feel like one of Blackwell's thugs. He let me see he was holding a subcompact automatic on me from inside his coat. It took me a moment, but then I remembered seeing him during the ambush outside my house. It's Dominic. Very well. Dominic, please keep moving. I'd rather not do this here in front of all these children, but I will if you force me to. He fell silent as we passed a teenage girl. Pipe cleaner, skinny, in a dark coat with a bright purple backpack. Hair tucked up under a light purple crew cap, obliviously texting away on her phone. You guys caught up faster than I thought you would. Facial recognition programs and the security software for the bridge cameras. We placed it in this area months ago for another operation. It was blind luck that it was still in place, and I just happened to be moving in this direction. I found your vehicle in the parking lot. I watched another family struggle past. The two kids were just out of toddler stage and had clearly reached breaking point. Even if I were in better shape and armed, there were way too many innocent bystanders around. Lucky me. He shrugged eloquently. He seemed awful polite for a hired operative. I was just too wary to make a move yet. He guided me into the utility hallway opposite the bathroom, and we walked down it until we reached a corner. I was out of time. He pushed me around the corner and brought his gun out. A sound like a dull, heavy bell rang through the tiled corridor. He took a single staggering step forward, then collapsed in a heap. The girl in the light purple crew cap stood behind him holding an almost comically large crescent wrench, poised for another swing, her face expressionless. She looked at me, then down at him, easily balancing the wrench across her skinny shoulder, crouching. She checked his breathing and pupil dilation mechanically, then picked up the gun. She cleared it with casual proficiency, tucking it and her wrench into her backpack almost as an afterthought. She pulled his wallet from his coat and stuck it in a silvery envelope. A moment later, she pulled the battery from his cell phone and dropped it into a trash can. Then the phone joined his wallet in the envelope. She stood and held her hand out with a stony expression. Come with me if you want to live. I just stared at her until she smirked, eyes glittering. Damn, I've always wanted to say that. Let's see the damage. Any injuries? No injuries, just a burning desire for payback, I replied, my voice cold and steady. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small first aid kit. Good. We might need you at full capacity. I'm your K2 contact. Call me Delaney. Pleasure. Now, can we get out of here before more of Blackwell's associates show up? She nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Oh, we're going to do more than that. We're going to take the fight to them. As we made our way out of the mall, I filled Delaney in on the details of my situation. The betrayal by Veronica, the classified information being sold to Blackwell, the attempt on my life. With each revelation, I could see a cold fury building in Delaney's eyes that matched my own. So what's the plan? She asked as we reached the nondescript sit-in in the parking garage. I slid into the passenger seat, my mind already racing with possibilities. First, we need to secure any remaining evidence. I have a hidden office at home with all the data I've collected on their operation. Then we take the fight to them. No mercy, no quarter given. Delaney's grin was feral as she started the car. I like the way you think, Dominic. Let's make these rivals regret the day they crossed you. As we pulled out of the parking garage, I felt a cold sense of purpose settle over me. Veronica and Blackwell had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. Now, they would pay the price, and I wouldn't rest until justice, my kind of justice, was served. The drive to my house was tense, every shadow potentially concealing an enemy. But Delaney's driving was impeccable, her situational awareness clearly honed by years of covered operations. As we pulled onto my street, I spotted the sleek Aston Martin still parked in the driveway. Nice car, I remarked, my voice tripping with sarcasm. Delaney's eyes narrowed. Gift from a friend, I take it. I nodded, jaw clenching. Veronica's new toy from Blackwell. Guess he likes to keep his assets happy. We parked a block away and approached the house on foot, using the cover of darkness and neighboring properties to mask our approach. As we neared, I could see Veronica through the living room window, pacing nervously, phone pressed to her ear. Looks like someone's getting antsy, Delaney murmured. What's our play? I considered our options for a moment. We need that evidence. I'll create a distraction, draw her out. You slip in and secure the data from my office. It's behind a hidden panel in the study. Third bookshelf on the left. War and Peace is the trigger. Delaney nodded, her expression serious. And if she gets in my way? Do what you have to do, I replied, my voice cold. But leave her breathing. I want answers before this is over. With a silent nod, Delaney melted into the shadows, circling around to the back of the house. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. Then, with deliberate steps, I strode up to the front door and rang the doorbell. The look of shock on Veronica's face when she opened the door was almost comical. Dominic, but how? I pushed past her into the house, my eyes scanning for immediate threats. Surprised to see me alive, darling. Sorry to disappoint. Veronica's shock quickly morphed into a mask of concern. Dominic, thank God, you're all right. I've been so worried. When I heard about the attack, I cut her off, my voice like ice. I know everything, Veronica, about Blackwell, about the classified intel you've been selling. Did you really think you could keep this from me? Her face paled, the facade crumbling. You don't understand, Dominic. It's not what you think. Jonathan. Jonathan. I spat the name like a curse. First name basis with the arms dealer now, are we? How thoughtful of him to buy you that new car. I'm sure it wasn't payment for betraying your country and your husband. Veronica's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. Please, just let me explain. You're in danger, Dominic. Jonathan has resources you can't even imagine. I took a step closer, my voice low and dangerous. I face worse, and I'm not alone in this. A flicker of fear crossed Veronica's face. What do you mean? Before I could answer, a muffled thud came from upstairs. Veronica's head snapped towards the sound. What was that? Is someone else here? I grabbed her arm, preventing her from investigating. Doesn't matter. You're not going anywhere, Veronica. It's time you faced the consequences of your actions. As if on cue, Delaney appeared at the top of the stairs, a small hard drive clutched in her hand. Got it. We should move. Veronica's eyes widened in recognition. You're the girl from the mall. Who are you? What are you doing in my house? Delaney ignored her, addressing me instead. Perimeter's still clear, but we shouldn't push our luck. What do you want to do with her? She nodded towards Veronica. I considered for a moment, then made my decision. She's coming with us. Blackwell will be looking for her, and I want to know everything she knows. Dominic, please, Veronica pleaded, her voice trembling. You don't know what you're getting into. Jonathan will harm us all. I tightened my grip on her arm. He can try. But first, you're going to tell us everything. Every detail, every contact, every little secret. And God help you if I think you're lying. As we hustled Veronica out to the car, I could see the reality of her situation finally sinking in. The woman I had loved, the life we had built together. It was all a lie. But I pushed aside any lingering sentiment. There would be time for regrets later. Right now, I had a mission to complete and a score to settle. Delaney took the wheel again, navigating us smoothly through the quiet suburban streets. In the back seat, Veronica sat silent, her face a mask of fear and resignation. I kept my eyes on the road behind us, watching for any sign of pursuit. "Where are we going?" Veronica finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere safe," I replied, not bothering to look at her. "Somewhere Blackwell won't find us until we're ready for him." As the city lights faded behind us, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The game had changed, and now I was the one calling the shots. Veronica and Blackwell had no idea what was coming for them, and I intended to keep it that way until it was too late for them to do anything about it. The road stretched out before us, dark and full of promise. Whatever came next, I was ready. They had tried to destroy me, to take everything I had built. Now it was my turn, and I would show no mercy. I leaned against the wall of the safe house, my eyes never leaving Veronica as she paced a small room like a caged animal. The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind of betrayal, violence, and cold calculation. Now, in the stark light of morning, I could see the toll it had taken on her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused. "You can't keep me here forever, Dominic," she spat, her earlier pleas for understanding replaced by venom. I didn't bother to respond. Instead, I turned my attention to the array of security monitors I'd set up. The safe house was a fortress, every entrance covered by multiple layers of protection. If Blackwell's men somehow managed to find us, they'd have won a tough fight on their hands. Delaney's voice crackled over the comm unit. "Perimeter's clear. No sign of activity within a 5-mile radius." "Copy that," I replied, my voice steady. "Keep your eyes open. These rivals are slippery." I could feel Veronica's gaze boring into me. When I finally looked at her, the hatred in her eyes was palpable. "You have no idea what you're up against, Dominic. Jonathan will find us. And when he does, he'll wish he'd never heard the name Dominic Thorne." I cut her off, my tone ice cold. "Your partner made a fatal mistake when he decided to use my wife against me. And you," I let out a harsh laugh, "you're even more of a fool for going along with it." Veronica's face contorted with rage. "You arrogant person. You think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? Always the big hero, the perfect soldier. Did it ever occur to you that maybe I wanted more than being a trophy spouse to someone who cared more about their work than their marriage?" I felt a flicker of anger quickly suppressed. "So you decided to sell out your country, to get involved with someone who deals in death and suffering. Tell me, Veronica, was it worth it? Was the money, the thrill? We're throwing away everything we built together." For a moment, I saw a crack in her facade, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold defiance. "You don't understand, Dominic. Jonathan offered me a chance at real power, not just being window dressing for your career. And the information we sold, it was going to make a difference in the world." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Oh, I'm sure it would have made a difference. More weapons in the hands of serious criminals, more innocent lives destroyed. You're delusional if you think Blackwell cares about anything other than lining his own pockets." Before Veronica could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. But I recognized the encryption immediately. "My contact in the task force. We have a location on Blackwell. Private island off the coast. Major arms deal. Going down in 48 hours. I felt a surge of anticipation. This was it. The chance to take down Blackwell and his entire operation in one fell swoop. I looked back at Veronica, a cold smile playing at the corners of my mouth. "Looks like your partner's luck is about to run out." Her eyes widened in fear. "Dominic, please. You don't have to do this. We can still work something out. I'll tell you everything I know. Just don't go after Jonathan. He'll harm you." I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "No, Veronica. He'll try, and he'll fail. And when the dust settles, you'll both rot in a cell for the rest of your lives." I turned away, already mentally preparing for the mission ahead. Veronica's pleading voice faded in the background noise as I focused on the task at hand. There was no room for hesitation, no place for mercy. Blackwell and his operation had to be dismantled, and I would be the one to do it. Hours passed in a blur of preparation. Weapons were checked and double-checked. Intel was poured over. Every detail of Blackwell's compound memorized. The task force assembled, a group of hardened operatives from various agencies, all united in their determination to bring down one of the world's most notorious arms dealers. As night fell, I made one final check of the safe house security. Veronica sat in silence, all fight gone out of her. I felt nothing as I looked at her. The woman I had once loved was now nothing more than a stranger, a traitor to be dealt with. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "When this is over, the authorities will come for you. I suggest you start thinking about how to save what's left of your life." She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Dominic, I'm sorry for everything." I paused at the door, not bothering to turn around. "Save it for the judge, Veronica. Your apologies mean nothing to me." With that, I stepped out into the night, leaving behind the ruins of my old life and embracing the cold certainty of the mission ahead. The journey to Blackwell's Island was a study in stealth and precision. Under the cover of darkness, our team approached an especially modified submersible, its silent engines cutting through the inky water. The weight of my tactical gear was a familiar comfort, each piece of equipment, a trusted tool in what promised to be a brutal fight. As we neared the shore, I signaled for the team to surface. One by one, we emerged from the water like shadows, our black wetsuits blending seamlessly with the night. The island loomed before us, a dark mass against the star-studded sky. "Alpha Team, sound off," I whispered into my comm. 4 clicks answered me, each representing a member of my assault squad. Good. Everyone was in position and ready to move. "Bravo Team, status." "In position and ready to provide overwatch," came the quiet reply. "Our snipers are already in place, their high-power rifles trained on key points around the compound." I took a deep breath, centering myself for what was to come. This wasn't just about taking down Blackwell or avenging my own betrayal. It was about stopping a man who had caused untold suffering, who had profited from chaos and death. And I would see it done, no matter the cost. "Remember, people," I said, my voice low and steady. "Blackwell is the primary target. We want him alive if possible, but don't take any unnecessary risks. Anyone else is expendable." "Clear," came a chorus of affirmatives. I nodded, satisfied. These were professionals, the best of the best. They understood the stakes. "All right, let's move." We advanced through the dense jungle surrounding the compound, our movements silent and purposeful. Years of training kicked in, every sense heightened, alert for the slightest sign of danger. The occasional chirp of a nightbird or rustle of leaves in the breeze were the only sounds that broke the eerie stillness. As we neared the perimeter, I held up a fist, signaling the team to halt. Ahead, barely visible in the gloom, was the first line of defense, a high wall topped with razor wire, patrolled by armed guards. I tapped my comm twice, the signal for Bravo Team to take out the sentries. 2 muffled cracks split the air, so quiet they might have been mistaken for breaking branches. The guards crumpled silently, their bodies caught and lowered to the ground by their teammates before they could make a sound. "Clear," came the whisper over the comm. We moved forward, scaling the wall with practiced ease. Once over, we split into two-man teams, each heading for a pre-designated entry point. My partner, a former Delta Force operator named Martinez, fell into step beside me as we approached the side entrance to the main building. The lock was no match for Martinez's electronic bypass tool. Within seconds, we were inside. The cool, air-conditioned interior was a stark contrast to the humid night outside. I signaled for Martinez to take point, covering his advance as we moved deeper into the compound. The intel had been good. The layout matched our briefing perfectly, allowing us to navigate the maze-like corridors with confidence. As we neared the central area where Blackwell was likely to be, the sound of voices reached us, multiple languages, the clinking of glasses. The arms deal was in full swing. I tapped my comm 3 times, the signal to converge and prepare for breach. Within moments, I sensed rather than saw the rest of the team taking up positions around the room. We were in place, ready to spring the trap. On my mark, I whispered, 3, 2, 1, execute. The world exploded into chaos. Flashbangs detonated, filling the room with blinding light and deafening noise. We burst in, weapons at the ready, shouting commands in multiple languages. FBI, on the ground now. Interpol, hands where we can see them. Most of the arms buyers dropped immediately, stunned by the sudden assault. A few tried to resist, reaching for weapons, but were quickly subdued. In the midst of it all, I searched for one face, Jonathan Blackwell. I spotted him near the back of the room, trying to slip away in confusion. Not this time, you scoundrel. I charged forward, dodging panicked arms dealers and flying furniture. Blackwell saw me coming, his eyes widening in recognition and fear. He turned to run, but I was faster. I tackled him hard, driving him to the ground with all my weight behind it. He struggled, landing a solid elbow to my ribs, but I barely felt it through the surge of adrenaline. It's over, Blackwell, I growled, pinning him face down on the marble floor. You're done. He continued to thrash, spinning curses in multiple languages. I wrenched his arms behind his back, perhaps with more force than strictly necessary, and slapped on a pair of reinforced cuffs. As I hauled him to his feet, I leaned in close, my voice low and menacing. You made a big mistake coming after me and my family. I hope it was worth it. The fear in his eyes told me all I needed to know. He had underestimated me. Thought he could use Veronica to get to me without consequences. Now, as the reality of his situation sank in, I could see the dawning realization that he had miscalculated. I shoved him towards Martinez, who took custody of the prisoner, while the rest of the team was securing the other arms dealers and gathering evidence. The operation had been a complete success. As the adrenaline began to ebb, I took a moment to survey the scene. Years of work, months of personal anguish, all culminating in this moment. Blackwell's empire was in ruins, his buyers in custody, and a treasure trove of intelligence on global arms trafficking now in our hands. I felt no elation, no sense of triumph, only a grim satisfaction that justice had been served and a dangerous threat neutralized. There would be time for reflection later. For now, there was still work to be done. I keyed my comm, connecting to the task force headquarters. This is Alpha 1, target secured. I repeat, Blackwell is in custody. Operation successful. The response was immediate. Copy that. Alpha 1. Excellent work. Extraction team is en route. Secure the site and prepare for debrief. I acknowledged the order and turned back to the task at hand. The night was far from over, but the hardest part was done. Blackwell was finished, and soon Veronica would face her own reckoning. As I moved through the compound, overseeing the collection of evidence and the processing of prisoners, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. They had tried to destroy me, to use me for their own gain. Instead, they had only sealed their own fates. Let them rot in prison, I thought. Let them live with the knowledge that they had brought this upon themselves. As for me, I had a job to finish and a life to rebuild. and I would do it without a shred of remorse for the choices I had made. The extraction went smoothly. Our team and our prisoners loaded onto waiting helicopters as the first light of dawn began to streak the sky. As we lifted off, I watched Blackwell's island compound recede into the distance, knowing that it would soon be swarming with forensics teams and intelligence analysts, combing through every scrap of information we'd seized. The flight back to the mainland was a blur of fatigue and post-mission adrenaline crash. I managed to catch a few moments of restless sleep, my mind still racing with the events of the past few days. When we touched down at a secure military facility, I was alert and ready for the next phase. Blackwell was whisked away for immediate interrogation. I knew I wouldn't be allowed in the room. Too much personal involvement. But that was fine by me. I had other business to attend to. I made my way to the command center, where the task force leaders were already assembling for a preliminary debrief. As I entered, heads turned. I saw looks of respect and even a touch of awe on some faces. Good. Let them see what happens when you cross the wrong person. Thorne, the lead agent, a grizzled veteran named Harding, greeted me with a nod. Hell of a job out there. Initial reports are already coming in. Looks like we've got enough to put Blackwell away for multiple lifetimes, not to mention his buyers. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Good. What about stateside? Any movement on Veronica? Harding's expression turned serious. We've got a team en route to the safe house now. She'll be in custody within the hour. I nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction settle over me. I want to be there when they bring her in. Harding looked like he was about to object, but something in my expression must have changed his mind. All right, but you're strictly hands-off, understand? You've done your part. Let the system handle the rest. I didn't bother to respond. We both knew that the system was often flawed, manipulated by those with money and connections, but I had no intention of taking matters into my own hands. Veronica would face justice, one way or another. The drive to the safe house felt interminable. By the time we arrived, local law enforcement and FBI agents had already secured the perimeter. I stepped out of the SUV, my body aching from the night's exertions, but my mind sharp and focused. As I approached the house, the front door opened. Two agents emerged, Veronica between them, her hands cuffed behind her back. She looked small, defeated. Nothing like the confident woman I had married. When she saw me, her eyes widened in a mixture of fear and something else. Resignation, perhaps. I stopped a few feet away, my face impassive. It's over, Veronica. Blackwell's in custody. His entire operation has been dismantled. She said nothing for a long moment, just stared at me with those hollow eyes. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Now. I felt a surge of cold anger. Now you face the consequences of your actions. Treason, espionage, conspiracy. I hope it was worth it. Veronica's shoulders slumped. Dominic, save it. I cut her off. I don't want to hear your excuses or your apologies. You made your choice. Now live with it. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. As the agents led her to a waiting car, I heard her call out one last time. Dominic, please. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't turn back. Her words meant nothing to me now. The woman I had loved, the life we had built together. It was all ashes now, destroyed by her greed and betrayal. As the car drove away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over. There would be trials, debriefings, endless paperwork, but the worst was behind me. I had survived, had turned the tables on those who sought to destroy me, and I had done it without compromising who I was. Harding approached, a look of grudging respect on his weathered face. You did good, Thorne. Not many could have pulled this off. I nodded, accepting the compliment for what it was. What's next? He raised an eyebrow. Next, you've got about a mountain of paperwork to get through. Then I'd suggest a long vacation. You've earned it. I shook my head. I don't need a vacation. I need to get back to work. Harding studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll see what I can do. But Thorn, take some time to process all this. It's been one tough ride. As he walked away, I stood there, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Processed it. There was nothing to process. I had done what needed to be done. Nothing more, nothing less. Veronica and Blackwell had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences. As for me, I was ready for whatever came next. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also freed me. No more divided loyalties. No more secrets eating away at me. I was a weapon, honed and primed, ready to be aimed at the next threat. The following weeks were a blur of debriefings, court appearances, and endless meetings with lawyers. I provided all the evidence I had gathered against Veronica, ensuring that she would face the full weight of her crimes. The divorce proceedings were swift and merciless. I made sure she wouldn't see a dime of our shared assets. Throughout it all, I remained focused and driven. There was no room for doubt or regret. Veronica and Blackwell had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences. As for me, I was already looking ahead, ready for the next challenge. Months passed, and slowly, the dust began to settle. I found myself in a new apartment in Rome, the eternal city a fitting backdrop for this new chapter in my life. The events of the past year had changed me, hardened me in ways I was still discovering. But I had also found a strange sort of peace. It was a quiet evening when my phone rang. The secure line I kept for official business. I answered without hesitation. Thorn. The voice on the other end was familiar. My handler from the agency. We've got a situation brewing in Buenos Aires. Need someone with your particular skill set. You interested? I felt a surge of anticipation, the familiar thrill of a new mission. Details. Classified. Need to know basis only. But I can tell you it's big. Potentially bigger than Blackwell. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. When do I leave? Wheels up in 6 hours. I'll send a car. As I packed my go-bag, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me was different from the one who had stumbled upon his wife's betrayal all those months ago. Harder, colder, perhaps, but also more focused, more certain of his place in the world. I was no longer weighed down by secrets and divided loyalties. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also set me free. Now, I was living as my true self. A warrior, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. As I boarded the plane to Buenos Aires, I felt a sense of anticipation building. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. My past was behind me. The lessons learned etched into my very being. And my future, it was wide open, full of possibilities and purpose. The plane taxied down the runway, gathering speed for takeoff. As we lifted into the air, I settled back into my seat, a small determined smile playing at the corners of my mouth. The game was afoot once more, and this time, I was playing for keeps. Veronica's betrayal, Jonathan's attempt to harm me was past. I emerged victorious in that battle, and the future seemed bright and hopeful. The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day. I gathered my papers, nodding goodbye to the last few students shuffling out of my classroom. 20 years of teaching high school English, and the routine never changed. But lately, that routine had become a lifeline, the only constant in a world that felt increasingly off-kilter. I drove home, the same route I'd taken for years. The modest 2-story house came into view, a home that once held dreams and warmth. Now it felt like a facade, much like my marriage to Sylvia. Sylvia, even her name, left a bitter taste in my mouth. We drifted apart, 2 strangers sharing a space. Her dreams had outgrown our simple life, while I remained content with what we built together, or so I thought. I entered the quiet house, noticing Sylvia's purse on the counter. She must be upstairs. I loosened my tie, heading to the kitchen for a much-needed drink. That's when I saw it, a crumpled receipt peeking out of her purse. Normally, I wouldn't pry, but something instinctively made me reach for it. As I smoothed out the paper, my heart sank. The Regal Hotel, a luxury suite, booked by Alejandro Meyer. Alejandro, the name echoed in my mind, the charming architect who'd been hanging around Sylvia lately. I'd seen the way she looked at him, but I'd dismissed it as harmless admiration. Clearly, I'd been a fool. I clutched the receipt, my knuckles white. The front door opened, and Sylvia's voice rang out. "Gordon, you're home early." I turned, facing her as she entered the kitchen. She looked radiant, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. But now, all I saw was deception. "What's this?" I held up the receipt, my voice steadier than I felt. Sylvia's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. "You went through my things. Answer the question, Sylvia." She laughed, a sound that cut through me like glass. "Oh, darling, are you jealous?" I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This person before me was a stranger, cold and cruel, jealous. I repeated, my tone flat. Sylvia sauntered closer, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "You should be. Alejandro knows how to treat a woman. He doesn't bore her with talk of lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences, so you're admitting it. You're having an affair." She shrugged, reaching for the receipt. I pulled it away, and her eyes flashed with anger. "What did you expect, Gordon? Look at you, a high school teacher with delusions of grandeur. Alejandro is going places. He can give me the life I deserve." Each word was a dagger, but I refused to show her how deeply they cut. "And what life is that, Sylvia? One built on lies and deceit." She laughed again, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, please, spare me the moral high ground. You're just upset because you can't satisfy me anymore." I took a step back, suddenly seeing our entire marriage in a new light. Every late night, every secret phone call, it all made sense now. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. Sylvia smirked, clearly enjoying my pain. "Long enough. And tonight, I'm meeting him again. He's booked the penthouse suite. Don't wait up, darling. I'll be too busy being treated like a queen." She turned to leave, but I grabbed her arm. "Sylvia, think about what you're doing. We can work this out." She yanked her arm away, her eyes cold. "Work what out? There's nothing left to save, Gordon. You're clinging to the sham of a marriage. I want more, and Alejandro can give it to me." I watched her walk away, my world crumbling around me. The front door slammed, and I was left alone in the silence of our once happy home. Hours passed. I sat in the darkness, the receipt still clutched in my hand. As the night wore on, my shock turned to anger, then to a cold, calculating rage. Sylvia had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. I grabbed my keys and wallet, leaving behind a house that no longer felt like home. I spent the night in my car. Parking at the school, my mind raced with plans. Sylvia wanted to play games. Fine, but she'd soon learn that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. As dawn broke, I made my decision. Sylvia had shattered our life together. Now I would shatter her illusions of grandeur without mercy. The bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp. I was the first customer through the door. My resolve was already strong from a sleepless night of planning. "Good morning, Mr. Mayo." The teller greeted me with a smile. "How can I help you today?" I forced a pleasant expression. "I need to make some changes to my accounts." 30 minutes later, I walked out. Our joint account emptied, and Sylvia's credit cards canceled. It was amazing how quickly one could dismantle a life built over decades. Next stop, the lawyer's office. I called in a favor with an old friend who owed me. By noon, I had divorce papers drawn up. The ink still went on the signature line. Back at the house, I gathered a few essentials: clothes, important documents, the woodworking tools that had been my solace over the years. As I packed, my eyes fell on our wedding photo. Sylvia's smile, once so captivating, now seemed like a mask hiding the deceit that had always lurked beneath. I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table, along with a note. Queen of the streets now. Enjoy your pauper's palace. Short, cruel, and to the point. Just like her betrayal. As I loaded my car, Mrs. Henderson from next door called out, "Everything all right, Gordon?" Sylvia left in quite a hurry last night. I plastered on a smile. "Just fine, Mrs. Henderson. Sylvia's visiting a friend. I'm heading out for a bit myself." The lie came easily. Let Sylvia deal with the fallout when she returned. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, checking in under a false name. As I settled into the sparse room, my phone buzzed. Sylvia's name flashed on the screen. I declined to call, a sense of satisfaction settling over me. Hours passed. My phone lit up repeatedly. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all, imagining Sylvia's panic as she discovered her new reality. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I listened to the first voicemail. "Gordon, what have you done?" Sylvia's voice was shrill, panicked. "The cards aren't working. The account's empty. Call me back immediately." I deleted it without a second thought. The next message played automatically. "This isn't funny, Gordon. You can't do this to me. I'll tell everyone what a controlling person you are. You'll regret this." Her threats washed over me, leaving me cold. She'd already taken everything that mattered. What more could she possibly do? The final message was different. Alejandro's smooth voice filled the room. "Gordon, it's Alejandro. Look, I know you're upset, but let's handle this like adults. Call me back, and we can discuss it civilly." I laughed bitterly. Civilly. As if there was anything civil about stealing another man's wife. I deleted all the messages, then blocked both their numbers. Let them stew in their own mess. As night fell, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the blank TV screen. The initial rush of revenge was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. But I pushed it aside. This was just the beginning. Sylvia and Alejandro thought they'd played me for a fool, but they'd soon learn that I was capable of so much more than they'd ever imagined. I pulled out my laptop, fingers flying over the keys as I began to plan the next phase of my retaliation. Sylvia had connections in this town, friends in high places, but I had something far more valuable minus 20 years of quiet observation and a mind for strategy that no one had ever bothered to notice. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't enough to just walk away. No, I would dismantle their world piece by piece, just as they'd shattered mine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of calculated moves and quiet manipulations. I returned to work, playing the role of the dedicated teacher by day. But in the evenings, I set my plan in motion. It started small, a concerned comment to a mutual friend over coffee. "I'm worried about Sylvia," I confided, my voice low. "She's been under so much stress lately, acting erratically." Sarah, always eager for gossip, leaned in. "Oh, how so?" I sighed, the picture of a concerned husband. Mood swings, impulsive behavior. "I'm trying to be supportive," I trailed off, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. Sarah patted my hand. "Poor dear, both of you. I'll keep an eye on her. Make sure she's okay." I nodded gratefully, hiding my satisfaction. The seed was planted. At school, I overheard two teachers discussing local architects for a home renovation. "What about Alejandro Meyer?" one asked. "I've heard good things." I couldn't resist. "Careful with that one," I warned, keeping my tone casual. "I've heard he's got a reputation for getting overly involved with his clients, especially the married ones." Their eyes widened, and I knew the rumor would spread like wildfire. Weeks passed, and I watched as my carefully orchestrated whispers took root. Sylvia, once the darling of our social circle, found herself increasingly isolated. Invitations dried up. Friends became distant, and Alejandro, his golden boy reputation, began to tarnish. I ran into Sylvia at the grocery store, her cart filled with cheap wine and TV dinners. She looked haggard, her designer clothes wrinkled. "Gordon," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "What have you been saying about me?" I gently removed her hand, my face a mask of confusion. "I haven't said anything, Sylvia. Are you feeling all right? You look unwell." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play innocent. My friends are avoiding me. Alejandro's clients are canceling. This has your fingerprints all over it." I shrugged, keeping my voice level. "Sounds like you're having a rough time. Maybe you should talk to someone about that." She opened her mouth to retort, but I was already walking away, leaving her fuming in the frozen food aisle. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Jocelyn, a local influencer, and one of Sylvia's closest friends, approached me after a school event. "Gordon, can we talk?" Her voice was hushed, her eyes darting around nervously. I nodded, leading her to a quiet corner. "What's on your mind, Jocelyn?" She bit her lip. "It's about Sylvia. I'm worried about her. She's been saying some concerning things about you." I raised an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. "Oh," Jocelyn looked uncomfortable. "She's talking about exposing you. Says you're abusive and controlling." "But Gordon, I've known you both for years. It doesn't add up." I let out a heavy sigh. "Jocelyn, I appreciate your concern. Sylvia's been going through a lot lately. I'm afraid she's not thinking clearly." "So it's not true?" I met her gaze steadily. "What do you think?" She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I thought as much. Don't worry, Gordon. I won't let her spread these lies." As Jocelyn walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. Sylvia's last desperate attempt to turn the tables had backfired spectacularly. That night, I sat in my new apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand. My phone buzzed with a news alert. A local gossip column had run a story about a scandalous affair between a prominent architect and a married woman. No names were mentioned, but the implications were clear. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Checkmate, my dear. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot. But as I watched Sylvia and Alejandro's carefully constructed world crumble, I felt a surge of satisfaction. They'd underestimated me, seeing me as a simple, naive teacher. Now they were learning just how wrong they'd been. I sat at my desk, grading papers when my phone buzzed with a notification. Another post from Jocelyn, Sylvia's influencer friend. I clicked on it, my jaw clenching as I read. "Sometimes the strongest women are the ones who suffer in silence. #stay strong, #hidden truths." I scrolled through the comments. People were already speculating, some even mentioning Sylvia by name. Jocelyn was playing her part well. I had to admit, a knock on my classroom door interrupted my thoughts. It was Principal Hawkins. "Gordon, got a minute?" I nodded, gesturing for him to enter. "Of course, sir. What can I do for you?" Hawkins closed the door behind him, his expression grave. "There's been some talk about you and Sylvia. Is everything all right?" I met his gaze steadily. "Sylvia and I are going through a divorce. It's unfortunate, but these things happen." "That's not all I'm hearing, Gordon. There are rumors." I cut him off. "With all due respect, sir, my personal life is my own business. I can assure you it won't affect my work here." Hawkins studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, I appreciate that," I said, effectively ending the conversation. As soon as Hawkins left, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Frank, it's Gordon Mayo. Remember that favor you owe me?" Frank chuckled. "How could I forget? What do you need, Teach?" I smiled. "I need you to dig up some dirt on Jocelyn Carter, the social media influencer, and I need it fast. Consider it done. I'll call you when I have something." I hung up, my mind already racing with plans. Sylvia and Jocelyn thought they could destroy me with lies. They were about to learn a harsh lesson in consequences. The next day, I volunteered to chaperone the school dance. As I helped set up decorations, I made sure to chat with the students, asking about their lives and hopes. I knew word would get back to their parents about the kind, caring Mr. Mayo. One of the students, Emily, approached me hesitantly. "Mr. Mayo, Is it true what they're saying online about you and your wife? I've put on my best concerned teacher face. Emily, you shouldn't believe everything you read online. Sometimes people say hurtful things when they're angry or hurt themselves. The important thing is to always treat others with kindness and respect. Don't you agree? Emily nodded, looking relieved. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Mayo. As she walked away, I noticed several other students watching our interaction. Good. The seeds of doubt were being planted. That evening, as I was leaving the school, my phone rang. It was Frank. Gordon, you're going to want to hear this. Turns out your friend Jocelyn isn't as squeaky clean as she pretends to be. I've got emails proving she's been taking payments to promote products without disclosing it. Illegal as well. Oh, and there's more. She's been fudging her follower numbers, buying fake accounts. Her whole image is built on lies. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Send me everything you've got, Frank, and make sure it's untraceable. Already done. Check your encrypted email. I thanked him and hung up, a plan already forming in my mind. Jocelyn's campaign against me was gaining traction, but not for long. I had the ammunition I needed to bring her down, and with her still be his entire narrative. As I drove home, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they were so clever, trying to paint me as a villain, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with. By the time I was done, they'd wish they'd never crossed Gordon Mayo. The fallout was swift and brutal. I'd leaked the evidence of Jocelyn's fraudulent activities to several reputable journalists, and within days, the story broke. Her carefully crafted image crumbled overnight. I was in the teacher's lounge when the news hit. The TV was on, showing Jocelyn's tearful apology video. I never meant to deceive anyone, she sobbed on screen. I got caught up in the pressure of maintaining my image. Turn that off, muttered one of my colleagues, reaching for the remote. I stopped him. Wait, I think we should watch this. It's important to stay informed about the influence social media has on our students. As we watched, I noticed the sideways glances from my coworkers. They were connecting the dots, realizing that Jocelyn was the same person who'd been spreading rumors about me. After the broadcast, Sarah, the English teacher, approached me. Gordon, I owe you an apology. I may have believed some of the things I heard about you. I should have known better. I waved off her apology. No need, Sarah. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. She nodded, looking relieved. You're a good person, Gordon. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As Sarah walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. The tide was turning. Later that day, as I was leaving school, I spotted a familiar figure storming towards me. Sylvia, her face contorted with rage. You, she screamed, drawing the attention of nearby students and parents. What did you do? How did you get that information about Jocelyn? I remained calm, aware of our audience. Sylvia, I think you need to calm down. This is neither the time nor the place for this discussion. Don't tell me to calm down, she shrieked. You ruined everything. You're supposed to be destroyed, humiliated. How are you still standing? I noticed phones being pulled out. People recording the scene. Perfect. Sylvia, I said, loud enough for others to hear. I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time, but making a scene like this isn't going to help anyone. Why don't we talk about this privately, like adults? Her eyes widened with fury. You condescending person. You think you're so much better than me. I'll show you. She lunged at me, her nails raking across my face. I stumbled back, shocked by the sudden attack. Mrs. Mayo, Principal Hawkins' voice boomed across the parking lot. That's enough. As Hawkins rushed over, I touched my cheek, feeling the sting of the scratches. Sylvia stood there, breathing heavily, seeming to realize what she'd done. I didn't mean to. Hawkins cut her off. Mr. Mayo, are you all right? Do you want to press charges? I shook my head, playing the role of a magnanimous victim. No, that won't be necessary. I'm sure Sylvia is just upset. Perhaps she needs help. not punishment. Sylvia's face crumpled, a mix of anger and despair. As Hawkins led her away, I could feel the sympathy of the onlookers. They'd seen everything. The distressed woman attacking the calm, forgiving teacher. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Alejandro. "Gordon." His voice was tense. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied coolly. "This has gone too far. My clients are pulling out. My reputation is in tatters. Call off your plans, Gordon." "What do you want?" I laughed bitterly. "What do I want? I want you to understand the consequences of your actions, Alejandro. You thought you could take my wife, destroy my life, and walk away scot-free. You're learning a valuable lesson about karma." "Please," he begged, his smooth confidence gone. "I'll do anything. Just make it stop." "Anything?" I mused. "All right. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to publicly admit to your affair with Sylvia. You're going to tell everyone how you manipulated her, used her, and then you're going to leave town for good." There was a long pause. "And if I do this, you'll stop. You have my word," I said, knowing full well that my campaign against him was already self-sustaining. The community would do the rest. "Fine," he agreed, his voice defeated. "I'll do it." As I hung up, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Sylvia and Alejandro had tried to destroy me, to paint me as a villain. Instead, they'd orchestrated their own downfall. The next day, Alejandro's confession hit social media. The backlash was immediate and brutal. His business, already struggling, collapsed entirely. Sylvia, now exposed as the willing participant in an affair, found herself shunned by the very community she tried to turn against me. I watched it all unfold from a distance, playing the role of the dignified, wronged husband. The sympathy and support I received were overwhelming. People who'd once looked at me with suspicion now treated me with respect and admiration. As I stood in front of my class, teaching about the complexities of human nature and literature, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Sylvia and Alejandro had underestimated me, seeing only the mild-mannered teacher. They never realized that I could play the game better than they ever could. I thought I'd seen the last of Alejandro, but like a bad penny, he turned up again. This time, he came at me through the school, aiming to destroy the career I'd built over 2 decades. The first hint of trouble came when Principal Hawkins called me into his office one morning. His face was grim as I took a seat across from him. "Gordon, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. "There have been some allegations made against you." I leaned forward, my expression neutral. "What kind of allegations?" Hawkins sighed, sliding a folder across the desk. "Misconduct, Gordon, serious stuff. A colleague and several students have come forward with complaints." I opened the folder, scanning the contents. My blood boiled as I read the fabricated stories, the exaggerated accounts of minor classroom incidents twisted into something sinister. "This is nonsense," I said, closing the folder. "Who's behind this?" "The board is taking it seriously, Gordon. I'm sorry, but effective immediately. You're suspended pending an investigation." I stood up, my mind racing. "This is Alejandro's doing, isn't it? He's manipulating people, trying to ruin me." Hawkins shook his head. "I can't discuss the details. Please, Gordon, just go home. We'll be in touch." As I left the office, I saw Jared Livingston, a younger teacher I'd never been particularly close to. He avoided my gaze, hurrying past me. That's when I knew he was involved. I spent the next few days at home, fielding calls from concerned colleagues and friends, the news spreading quickly. I could feel the tide of public opinion shifting against me once again. Then, unexpectedly, I received a visit from Marshall John, a veteran teacher, and one of the few people I considered a true friend. "Gordon," he said as I opened the door, "we need to talk." I ushered him in, and we sat in my living room. Marshall looked troubled, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something more serious. "I know you didn't do what they're saying," he began, And I think I have proof. My eyebrows shot up. What kind of proof? Marshall pulled out his phone. I overheard Jared talking to someone the other day. He sounded scared, like he was being forced into something. I recorded it. Listen. He played the recording. Jared's voice came through clearly. I can't do this anymore. It's not right. Gordon's never done anything wrong. No, you don't understand. He's threatening me, saying he'll expose. Look, I don't care about the money anymore. This has gone too far. I leaned back, a smile on my face. Alejandro. It has to be him. Marshall nodded. That's what I figured. What are you going to do? I stood up, my resolve getting stronger. I'm going to end this once and for all. Can you get me a meeting with the school board? Marshall grinned. Consider it done. The next day, I stood before the school board, Marshall by my side. I played the recording, watching as their expressions changed from skepticism to shock. Mr. Mayo, the board president said after a long silence, we owe you an apology. It's clear you've been the victim of a malicious campaign. I nodded, my voice steady. I appreciate that. But I think we need to address the root of the problem. Alejandro Meyer has been orchestrating this smear campaign. He manipulated Jared and those students. I believe he should be held accountable. The board members exchanged glances. We'll look into it, Mr. Mayo. For now, consider your suspension lifted. We'll issue a public apology and clear your name. As we left the meeting, Marshall clapped me on the back. You did it, Gordon. Alejandro's finished. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Not quite yet, but he will be. True to their word, the school board issued a public apology. The community rallied around me, outraged at how I'd been treated. Alejandro, his last desperate attempt to destroy me having backfired spectacularly, went to ground. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Alejandro had tried to take everything from me. Now, I would return the favor. Despite my victory at the school, I still had one last battle to face, the divorce court. Sylvia, emboldened by the state's no-fault divorce laws, swaggered into the courtroom like she owned it. As the judge read out the settlement, I kept my face impassive. Sylvia, on the other hand, couldn't hide her glee. Mr. Mayo, as per the state laws, your wife is entitled to half of your joint assets. The judge declared, this includes your savings, pension, and property. Sylvia leaned over, her voice a venomous whisper. Hear that, Gordon? I win after all. I said nothing, merely nodding at the judge's words. Inside, however, my mind was already several steps ahead. As we left the courthouse, Sylvia couldn't resist one last dig. She strutted down the steps, her newly acquired wealth practically radiating from her. Oh, Gordon, she called back, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Don't look so glum. At least you still have your precious teaching job. Though I can't imagine the pay will cover much more than a shabby little apartment now. I watched her go, my expression unchanging. Alejandro stood at the bottom of the steps, looking uncomfortable. He kept his distance throughout the proceedings, no doubt aware of how precarious his own position was. Sylvia reached him, linking her arm through his. Come on, darling, let's go celebrate my newfound fortune. Alejandro hesitated, glancing up at me. I met his gaze coolly, and he quickly looked away. Actually, Sylvia, I have a meeting. Maybe another time. Sylvia's face fell, but she quickly recovered. Fine, more for me then. As they walked away, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Martin, it's Gordon. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. Martin Maynard. A smooth-talking con man I'd once helped out of a tight spot. Well, the straight-laced teacher finally needs my particular set of skills. What's the game, Gordon? I outlined my plan, watching as Sylvia climbed into a taxi, no doubt headed for the nearest luxury boutique. Can you do it? I asked. For you, Gordon, consider it done. This Sylvia won't know what hit her. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as Martin worked his magic. He approached Sylvia at her favorite upscale bar, playing the part of a successful entrepreneur to perfection. I sat at the other end of the bar, nursing a drink, as Martin regaled Sylvia with tales of exclusive investment opportunities and promises of easy wealth. "You see, my dear," Martin was saying, his charm turned up to 11. "These opportunities are usually reserved for the upper echelon of society, but I see something special in you. A woman of your sophistication deserves to be among the elite." Sylvia preened under his attention. "Well, I always knew I was destined for greater things. My ex-husband could never understand that." Martin leaned in conspiratorially. "Ah, yes, small-minded men often fail to recognize true potential. But you, Sylvia, you have a gift. I can help you turn that settlement into a fortune that will make your ex-husband's head spin." I hid my smile behind my glass. Sylvia was falling for it hook, line, and sinker. Over the following months, Martin gradually introduced Sylvia to higher-stakes ventures. I kept tabs on her through my network of contacts, watching as she threw herself into this new world of supposed luxury and exclusivity. One evening, I received a call from Martin. "Gordon, my friend, I think it's time for the grand final. Our dear Sylvia has developed quite the taste for high-stakes gambling. What do you say we introduce her to a game she can't possibly win?" I hesitated for a moment, then steeled myself. "Do it." The next week, I stood outside a high-end casino, watching as Sylvia entered, dressed to the nines. Martin had set up a private game, promising unimaginable riches to the winner. Hours later, Sylvia stumbled out, her face ashen. I stepped out of the shadows, startling her. "Gordon, what are you doing here?" I shrugged. "Just out for a walk." "You look upset, Sylvia." "Rough night." She glared at me, her earlier bravado gone. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm fine." I nodded. "Of course. Well, good night, then." As I walked away, I heard her burst into tears. But I didn't look back. Sylvia had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. The fallout from Sylvia's gambling addiction was swift and merciless. Within months, she had lost everything. The divorce settlement, her social standing, even her designer wardrobe. I heard through the grapevine that she'd been reduced to selling her prized possessions just to cover her basic expenses. Her once vibrant social life had evaporated, with friends abandoning her as quickly as her money had. One day, I ran into Sarah, the English teacher, at the local coffee shop. "Gordon," she said, her voice hushed. "Did you hear about Sylvia? They say she's living in some rundown apartment on the edge of town. Can you believe it?" I shook my head, keeping my expression neutral. "Life can change quickly, Sarah. It's a shame." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "You're a better person than I am, Gordon. After everything she put you through, I don't know if I could be so understanding." As I left the coffee shop, I allowed myself a small smile. Understanding? No, but satisfied. Absolutely. Weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. My reputation at the school had never been stronger, with students and parents alike singing my praises. The community, having witnessed my grace under pressure, rallied around me. One sunny Saturday, as I was working in my garden, I noticed a figure approaching my house. As they got closer, I realized it was Melody, the kind-hearted librarian I'd grown close to in recent months. "Gordon," she called out, waving. "I hope I'm not interrupting." I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. "Not at all, Melody. What brings you by?" She held up a book. "I found that novel you were asking about. Thought I'd drop it off." I invited her in, and we spent the afternoon talking books, life, and everything in between. As the sun began to set, Melody stood to leave. "This was lovely, Gordon," she said, her smile warm. "We should do it again sometime." I nodded, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. "I'd like that." As I watched her go, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future. The next day, I decided to finish a project I'd been working on for weeks, a beautifully crafted wooden box. As I applied the final coat of varnish, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. Sylvia's betrayal, Alejandro's schemes, the battles I'd fought. It had been a long, hard road, but I'd come out the other side stronger. Once the varnish had dried, I went to my desk and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter Sylvia had sent months ago, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I'd never opened it. I placed the letter in the box, closed the lid, and locked it. Then I went out to the backyard, dug a small hole, and buried the box. As I patted down the earth, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The past was where it belonged, buried and forgotten. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked out over my garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. In that moment, I felt truly free. Sylvia, Alejandro, and the pain and betrayal they'd caused. It was all behind me now. I had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. As I walked back into my house, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered that damning receipt all those months ago. This man was stronger, wiser, and unafraid of whatever challenges life might throw his way. I smiled at my reflection, then turned away. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it held.